learning and listening session with the City of Richfield. Today we're coming together as a community to discuss organized collection. We want to hear from residents, questions they may have, concerns. Myself and other staff is gathering information that we will be bringing back to the council so they can make a decision about next steps in the process. Before we get started, as you can see, we're using WebEx as a platform. I know people use a lot of different virtual platforms during the pandemic for meetings, but if you're new to WebEx, just so everyone understands kind of the basic functions of it, on the very bottom of your screen, if you're on a computer or tablet, you'll see the mute button. If you want to go ahead and press that, that way we don't pick any sounds in other people's homes, dogs barking, that kind of thing. So if you want to press mute, that would be great. The button next, have a video function and you don't want to have your face on the screen, you can press stop video. If you'd like to, be present, you can press start video and your face will show up there. And then all the way over on the right, there is another little box with 3 dots. If you click on that, there is a line there that says closed captions. If you click on the closed captions, what we present today and what we discussed will be being translated into Spanish. So we have a wonderful interpreter with us today named Kayleen. We appreciate her translating for us. So if you would like Spanish translation, it will be down in the closed caption box. And with us today, we have our sustainability specialist, Rachel Lindholm. My name is Amy Markle. I'm the Recreation Services Director. As I said, Kayleen's with us helping with translation. We also have our IT Director, Jane Scott. So if we get into any pickles with the IT end of things, we'll be able to hopefully lean on her for help. But our plan today is just to go through a really short presentation that has some basic information about organized collection. And then we're going to open it up and just listen to one another and listen to questions people have, concerns they have about organized collection, and hopefully be able to provide more information. And we'll gather this, as we said, and bring it back to our council at a later date. So we will get started with the presentation first, and then we'll open it up to a discussion after. So hopefully everyone can see the slide on your screen. Starting off looking at organized collection, just so everyone understands what it is, because it is a newer organized system to Minnesota. We see it quite commonly in other places in the country, but it's a waste collection system where haulers that are currently licensed in Richfield each serve a number of households based on their market share. These customers are located in the same area of the city, which helps more easily and efficiently coordinate collection. So it's not a single hauler system, but everyone who is currently licensed would be involved in organized collection. And one of the reasons that the city is interested in organized collection is to improve our annual rates of recycling. And when you look at all the municipalities in Hennepin County, 42 out of 44 cities do have organized recycling. So we are one of 2. The other one is Eden Prairie. And you can see we have a low participation rate when it comes to recycling. And this could be due to less education and outreach with residents. We have increased contamination that also adds to that low number. Hennepin County has a goal of reaching a 75% combined recycling and organics rate for the Twin Cities by 2030. Currently, the metro is at 50%. So in the next less than a decade, we have about a 25% increase to reach that goal. And when you look at what is in our waste stream, almost a third of it is organic material. And that doesn't even include recycling. So the county has an Ordinance 13, which has goals around organics diversion. So certain businesses were required to have organics collection by January 1st of this year. And cities with more than 10,000 people, which would include Richfield, must make organic service available to all households with curbside recycling. And this would include single family and dwellings up to 4 units by January 1st of 2022. So this is mandated from the county. And looking at organized collection, the city does have several plans in place that support this initiative. The first one would be our climate action plan, which specifically references organized collection in goal number 5. You can see in italics, goal 5 includes organizing curbside solid waste, recycling, and organics collection by 2022 to increase accessibility and equity and achieve environmental benefits. We also included in this goal is to decrease waste generated and promote responsible disposal of all household waste. The other guiding plan that helps foster this work would be our 2040 comprehensive plan, which really promotes equity, affordability, sustainability, and helping increase a high quality of life for residents.
So there are a few different categories of reasons why the city has been considering organized collection, and a lot of these have come directly from residents in their communications with their council members or their communications with staff, or in other forms of feedback that the city has gotten. It also includes reasons for commonly accepted reasons for why many cities choose to organize. And the economic reasons include improving the value of services, increasing equity, and lessening the economic burden of an open system on marginalized populations, improving the standardization of service options so that all haulers are providing the same services, which is currently not provided or not seen throughout Richfield, and then ensuring all residents have proper waste management services. This has to do with, especially with dumping that our Public Works Department is frequently called to take care of, especially in our parks or around dumpster enclosures in the city, with people dumping, especially things like bulky items. But we have noticed as well bags of household trash being disposed of in the parks. So the next category is environmental reasons. So an organized system reduces environmental impacts, which includes noise pollution, air pollution, blowing litter, other things that just come from having trucks drive through the city. Improving safety with having each truck stop at each household. They travel at slower speeds. This has definitely been a big piece of feedback and concern that residents have shared about having the current system, is having trucks drive at higher speeds and speeds that residents are not comfortable with around town every day of the week across town. And lastly, reducing road wear impacts. This mostly has to do with the reduction in the number of trucks and the speed of the trucks. We do have 5 haulers currently licensed, and each of those operates several trucks every day of the week throughout town, depending on things like yard waste season, and the specific frequency of services that residents have. So really reducing the number of trucks that we see in the city. And lastly, the social and educational pieces. We would like to, we're considering an organized system as it minimizes disruption to residents. As I said, with the number of trucks, this has been a thing that we've heard a lot during the past year with the pandemic, and more residents being at home all day working, or helping with students learning from home, or whatever the case may be. We would also are hoping to minimize the disruption with a potential organized system. There's transition pieces involved in that, and it's a high priority to make sure that, if this process goes forward, that it's as smooth as possible. Increasing rates of recycling, composting, and waste reduction. Amy mentioned this before. There's really no coordinated public education from the haulers, about necessarily like the annual recyclables that are accepted. Some haulers promote that, and some don't as much. Enhancing coordination among government agencies. We have to report to Hennepin County how much waste is collected in the city, recycled, all that sort of fun data stuff. So really being able to know how much we are producing in Richfield, and how responsibly we are disposing of it as well. That ties into improving hauler reporting systems, and as I mentioned before, increasing public education and awareness. This talks about aspects like organics collection, which is a concept that not everybody, and a service that not everybody is super familiar with. It's pretty much how curbside recycling started out. That's kind of where we're at with organics. So really making sure that we can continue to educate residents about the need for waste management services like organics collection, and the environmental benefits and financial benefits of it as well. So a little bit about the process and the timeline. There are two columns. So the 2020 column are the actions that we have already completed or started, with the legal notice being published in November, an initial meeting in November with the haulers. We started negotiations last Friday. And obviously our public engagement and education is ongoing, as you all are attending one of the sessions today. And then the potential process in 2021, as we consider organizing collection and continue researching, the different possibilities for Richfield, and how current rates are averaging out, and what future or proposed rates could look like. If a draft contract is proposed, it could be brought to the city council in February or March, depending on how long negotiations last. And that's brought back to council and the community for more feedback and a public hearing, to see if this is the direction that the city would like to go, and if this provides all the services that residents are interested in, and obviously has competitive rates and things like that. And then it could be approved through a council vote in the spring, with implementation potentially in the summer or fall. The 2021 timeline is really tentative and hard to pin down for several reasons, including the pandemic, the length of negotiations. We just don't know how it's really all going to work out. So we do our best to estimate it, and we'll see how it goes. So lastly, I want to touch on our public engagement and education. All of it's virtual, of course. These pictures are from previous project engagements. We have the listening and learning sessions. You all are attending the last one, the third session. The first two are on the city's YouTube channel. If you are interested in hearing the presentation again, it's the same one. But if you're interested in hearing other resident feedback and questions, both sessions are on YouTube and the city website. The website also hosts a frequently asked questions document that answers, I think it's about 4 pages worth of frequently asked questions. So you can find a lot more information over there. Our staff are available to answer questions, me specifically. My contact information is on the website and was on the postcard that was mailed out. So I'm always available for calls and emails. Obviously, like I mentioned, the citywide mailer, and then the potential public hearing with when a draft contract is brought back to city council. So this is ongoing, and we share information with the public as we are made aware or reach certain steps in the process. There are obviously parts of the process that aren't as public, like the official negotiations. We are doing our best to make this as transparent as possible. So with that, I'll stop sharing, and we can move into the feedback portion and start with probably people on the phone.
Yeah, I think for the feedback portion, the listening component, the way that's worked easiest with the two other meetings is if people would like to verbally make a comment, you can just type in the chat that you'd like to make a comment or question, just write comment or question. And then when we'll just kind of go down the list, and then we'll just call on you if you would like to verbally make it. The other option too is you can always type a question into the chat or a comment, and we can read it to the group and answer it. We've already answered that question. We'll probably move on to the next one, and if we have time, we can circle back and talk about it more. But just so we can reach as many people with different comments and questions, we'll try to move down the list. And I know there'll be people that have multiple questions and comments. And just so we can hear it from as many people as possible, we'll probably allow people to ask a few and then just keep moving down the list. If for some reason we don't get every question and comment answered, please feel free to reach out to Rachel or myself. You can always email or call us, and we'd be more than happy to listen and chat with you about organized collection. And as Rachel noted, it's probably easiest for the folks that are calling in answer their questions first, just because it's a little harder for them to type in the chat. So if you did call in, if you would like to start with any questions, you can just unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hi, Amy. This is Carl Ermish. Can you hear me?
I can, yep.
Okay. My concern is I was a customer of Republic Service for a long time, and this past summer, they really went in the tank, being very unreliable, missing my yard recycling in particular a number of times. And when you call in, they had very poor customer service. Nothing was ever really resolved. I have subsequently switched companies. Who is going to hold these companies? Because I assume Republic is going to be in the mix of these 5 that Rachel mentioned. Who's going to hold these companies toes to the line and make sure that service is uniform and that they do what they're expected to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Do you want to take that one, Rachel? Yep. Thanks, Carl. That's a great question. We've heard a lot, obviously, from residents with different haulers about service complaints. And one of the benefits of organized collection is having more of a set contract with these haulers than you as an individual have with your hauler. So contracts in an organized system include things like financial penalties for missed pickups and other, service mistakes and things like that. That is another way to hold haulers accountable. That isn't present in an open system. We also know that with cities that are organized, they do see a reduction in missed pickups in general. And there's several reasons for that. One is that you have a hauler who is servicing a specific part of the city. It's a lot harder to miss a pickup when you're also servicing every other household on that block. There's no reason for it. We also have better communication with haulers in an organized system. For example, with your yard waste example, I was made aware of that like way delayed in the process, just because the city obviously doesn't get involved in issues in an open system. However, residents were really frustrated and eventually found their way to me. So I tried to do what I could to help, but I don't have that established communication with haulers where, in an organized system, they would share, we're not able to pick up yard waste due to the Republic's reason was due to staff being out with COVID exposure or quarantine. But I didn't know that, and residents didn't know that. So it took a lot longer to get any sort of information. In an organized system, that communication is there. And I would be able to, and city staff would be able to help make sure that those potential problems are resolved quicker than they are in an open system.
Okay, any other callers have a question?
I have a question.
Could I have one real quick follow-up? Would the billing be on property tax or on water bill, or would that be still something that we pay individually?
Thanks, Carl. The city is looking at having haulers who have the established billing infrastructure continue with the billing. The city, with staffing capacity, is currently unable to consider that as a city bill, so it wouldn't show up on your utility bill.
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, so my question is, you mentioned two things, standardization and equity, but everybody has different needs, and it seems to me like this would just shoehorn everybody into the same one-size-fits-all system. And I've heard other situations where there's just no variation for people's different needs. It's kind of like having one grocery store and everybody has to buy the same cereal, the same meat. It's just seems to be that it's going to become a one-size-fits-all situation.
Well, there's certain services that are currently required by either the city or the county or the state, like recycling required to have disposal services. We are not looking at a system where all residents would be required to have optional services, which are usually yard waste pickup and bulky item collection. We're not interested in building a system that requires all residents to pay in for services like that they may not use. And there's the standardization is more so like having all haulers provide walk-up service to residents who are in need of that, are in physical need of walk-up service, but providing that to all residents who need it for free. Currently, some haulers don't provide it and some charge, no matter what the reason a resident might need it is. And so that's the standardization we're talking about, not standardization in the sense that everyone's required to have all services or a certain size bin or anything like that.
Because that's where you have competition. You can contract with another hauler if they're not providing the services that you want or need, or if they're not providing the service that you expect for what you're paying for. Where do you go if the one size fits all doesn't really provide the service that you're expecting?
Right.
Prices,
so
whatever.
Yeah, so that's the goal of having an organized system is to make sure that quality service is being provided to all residents regardless of the hauler, so that ideally there is no situation and is in the position to say, okay, where do I go? Because they are receiving the same service with any hauler. We hear from some residents who say, oh, I have X hauler and that's the best service, and I've had other haulers and it's not great. And our goal is to provide that, is to help have all haulers providing that best service.
But that's kind of how we do things, though, is we look for the best and we assess our choices, and then we go with who we think is the best, and we can make changes if we feel we need to. And it's kind of how we choose our car insurance. It's how we choose our cars. It's how we choose our houses. I don't quite understand why the trash service is different.
If I may interject, we were part of the Republic, and we've been dealing with them now for 9 months, trying to get services. And I feel as an individual person, I have no leverage at all. And they never ended up picking up our yard waste. So I kind of disagree with you that you do have leverage. I certainly didn't. And maybe it was just me with no leverage.
But not even to call and say, I'm going to go with another company if you don't improve your service?
Unfortunately, not all residents have had that experience to even to say to haulers and get the results they're satisfied with, and that's where we hear a lot of complaints from people who are not aware of that option, or who are aware and the haulers still aren't providing that service, or removing their bins or switching out their bins, or whatever the situation may be. So I'm glad that you've been able to have a positive experience with getting the results you'd like from a hauler, but we are hearing from a lot of other residents that that's not entirely the case.
Okay, so if there's any other callers who have a question or comment, please feel free to jump in. Okay.
Hi there, this is Tasha. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I was wondering, and I'm sorry, I kind of multitasking with work here too, but is there going to be, I heard you say yard waste service and possibly composting as well?
Yeah,
Yep.
so there'll be a component of the program where people can opt in to have curbside organics collection, and that would be a weekly feature that people would be able to compost food scraps, and it would be going to an industrial compost site. So you'd be able to do composting of items that you may not always be able to, because that type of facility can take, like pizza boxes, non-bleach napkins, things like that, coffee grounds and non-bleach coffee grounds or filters. So we'll be able to handle quite a bit. And what was the other part of your question? I'm sorry.
Yard waste.
Yard waste, yeah. So there will be an option that you can sign up for yard waste as well.
Yep, and we're looking at
like Bloomington has, where they pick up like large items like once or twice during the year. Would that be an option as well?
Yep. So for yard waste, we're looking at providing a variety of services. Some people like to pay per bag, some people like carts, some people like just putting out bags. So really providing those options, but again, making sure that all haulers are offering those, because that's not currently the case. And then for bulky item collection, which is the other part that you were referring to, that's also, we've gotten a lot of feedback on both sides of that, feedback from residents who don't want to pay for that service because they don't really ever have bulky items to get rid of, and people who want, as many bulky items as possible allowed. So I think we're still figuring out specifically what a bulky item collection system would look like for Richfield, if that's again a pay per item kind of system, especially since bulky items are such a broad system, including everything from furniture to appliances to, it costs different rates to get rid of those materials, to considering things like drop-off events, or potentially including a number of items in the contracts. But again, we have heard from residents who don't want to pay for a service that they wouldn't be using or wouldn't be using every year. So Bloomington's event is really in a class of its own. No other city runs an event like that, and Bloomington has been making changes to their event over the past few years and is continuing to do so, because it's a financially expensive program to run, and they're trying to shift some parts of it. Currently, all residents in Bloomington, at least residential, for residential organized collection, are charged for that program that they run, and I think might be $9 a month or $9 per or bi-monthly. I'm not sure, but that is a charge that everyone pays. So we have heard some feedback that would indicate that there are Richfield residents that aren't interested in that kind of program. So while we're figuring out what a Richfield bulky item collection system would look like, there will be something for sure.
All right, the next person, it just says Derko has a question, so feel free to ask. Last name for Derko.
I asked it further. Sorry, my mic is echoey, so you'll get to it. I'll wait. It's in the
Okay.
chat.
Okay. Kelly.
We did Kelly's because it's the Bloomington question.
Okay. Michelle has asked, can we have recycling collected weekly?
That's a good question. This is also one that I've heard quite a bit from residents who are interested in weekly recycling. And in terms of how the city is collecting data on this, what we're doing is asking haulers to propose rates for weekly recycling as well as every other week recycling to be able to bring that back to the community and say, okay, here are the proposed rates in an organized system for both services. What is the community leaning towards? Edina did a similar thing, and their residents actually chose to stick with every other week recycling. But it's just, more of saying, okay, we know that on average, Richfield residents pay this for recycling, and I can look that data up later. But, so what would the organized rates be proposed as? And then can you also split it by collection methods? So that's something we don't have the rates on yet since we did just start negotiations. But if that's what the community wants, that can certainly be included in the contract.
Okay. The next question is from Lisa Tesh, and she asked, will negotiations with the carrier be reviewed annually for pricing? Typically, it goes up every year, so will this likely still happen?
That's a good question, Lisa. So in an organized system, usually rates are set throughout the contract. So typically, yes, an annual escalator is included in most contracts, and that's common whether you're in an open system or an organized system. The difference is in an open system, you don't always know how much that annual escalator will be. That can be the surprise when you get your bill. Frequently, when people are billed quarterly as well, you can just see increases, however small they might be, every quarter. It kind of just depends on how you're billed. So yes, an annual escalator is common, and obviously that's because the price to dispose of waste, especially to incinerate waste or landfill waste, so specifically trash costs, keep going up. It becomes more expensive, just like most stuff becomes more expensive, and that's our landfills are filling up and our incinerators are reaching capacity. We keep producing waste, so it keeps becoming more expensive to dispose of it, and that's why we're hoping to really focus also on waste reduction and other forms of disposal through an organized system, so that we aren't producing as much and therefore saving residents are saving money as well. So negotiations wouldn't necessarily be reviewed annually, as the terms are usually set through the contract. We are looking at details to see, what might be possible. Obviously, the pandemic has increased a lot of residential waste generation, so it doesn't make sense to enter into a contract potentially, during the throes of a pandemic when residential waste generation is on the rise and still be in it several years later, presumably when residential waste generation has decreased, and therefore costs might decrease as well. So we're still working out the details on that, but yes, annual escalators are common. They usually are a smaller percentage than what an open system increases are though.
Okay. Patty had a comment that she had the same thought about an annual holiday that would go a long ways towards dealing with large items that people tend to dump. Peter and Desiree have a question on billing.
Right.
Hello. Thank you for hosting this event. I know part of my question was already answered about where billing would come from, if it would come from the city or from the other haulers. Another question I have is on services, and I'm curious to know what would be the basic services and which services would be optional and which ones could you opt out of? Because I know with the new organics recycling that's going to be coming in, that'll be like an extra service, and it might be an extra cost to involve with that. So I'm just kind of curious to know what basic service would be.
Yeah, that's a great question. So trash and recycling, like I said, are already mandated in various, city, county, state legal documents and things like that. And so that wouldn't change. And as Amy mentioned during the presentation, the county has a residential organics mandate in their ordinance 13. And so the language is a little, I believe it says every resident in like 1 to 4 unit buildings essentially has to have the opportunity for organics collection. And different cities are fulfilling that in different ways. We want to make organics as successful as possible and as economically viable as possible. And to do that, the best thing is to have the most people participate in a program, which, drives down the cost and things like that. Like Amy also mentioned, about a third of what people are throwing away is compostable materials, and with the majority of that being food waste. So a lot of it is education to residents who might not be aware of how they could be saving money by throwing less in the trash, having a smaller trash can, which in part offset any cost for an organics program. Part of the cost savings of an organized collection system, also translates into a cost savings for, a cheaper organics program that's organized as well, as opposed to just having haulers be licensed to provide it and then the residents really fronting a large cost. And then there are other funding sources that the city could receive, like SCORE funding from the county, which would then be passed back to residents who participate in the program as an organics credit. So we're hoping that with all of these variety of services, funding options, that an organics program for most people that participate, depending on the price proposed by haulers and things like that, would essentially pay for itself in savings. There would be that cost, but then there could be the refund from the county, there could be your savings from your trash bill, and there would be the savings from organized collection in general. So still working on the details of being an opt-in versus opt-out program, but financially it does look very even in terms of pricing and savings. So I know it's a little bit of a confusing system to explain, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Question is from Lisa Tesh. She asks, will pickup continue to be all in one day or on multiple days of the week?
So we're hoping to continue having the same service days that currently exist. So if your trash and recycling, whatever you have, if that's picked up on Monday, we're hoping to continue that. Friday, same thing. I'm not sure. I think that's what Lisa means. Lisa, if that's not what you meant, please chime in. But yeah.
That's good. I just was curious because today, there's, which kind of leads in my other question. We have like 3 trucks today that come, one for each thing that we have picked up. So sure. I'm assuming if we go to organics, we'd also have another truck. I just didn't know if they'd be able to get 4 trucks coming to my house in one day, or if they'd have to end up changing that, because now they're going to have so many more houses to go to. I don't know that they're going to get everybody's house 3 or 4.
Oh, no, it should all work out to be in one day. So the way that the system works is that haulers are in an organized system, they get their previously existing market share in terms of the number of households. So that's how the city is essentially divided. Whatever a hauler percentage was at a certain point in time is the percentage that they get in an organized system. So they're not serving any more or any less. If we do add organics, obviously that is an additional service that most haulers do not provide right now. And so that would add another truck, but that's a different truck. So, it's not, they're not also picking up organics with a trash truck or anything like that. So all the services should continue to be in one day. I don't foresee that changing. If it does, obviously that would be something that we would bring back to the community and get feedback on.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is from Clayton Vasquez, and is, you showed comparison rates of collection of recycled materials, and you are also stressing a benefit will be equitable hauler rates. How do rates compare across the city of Richfield, and how do Richfield rates compare to other nearby cities? This is a great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So rates in Richfield itself, I obviously have, like I said, I've been analyzing the invoices that residents send in, which have been with all haulers across the city, all service levels, all optional services, all that fun stuff. And the discrepancies they're a lot. They can be a lot. You know, we don't see people even with the same hauler and same cart sizes paying the same amount. I just got a bill, a resident who's paying over $1,000 a year for waste services, and there are also residents who are paying about $300 a year. And it's not as if that person who pays $1,000 a year has 5 trash carts or anything like that. It's normal amounts of service. We just really see a lot of discrepancy in especially extra fees and environmental charges and fuel charges, and if people are receiving fuel charges or aren't, and even in just the base rates of trash and recycling themselves, there are discrepancies amongst the haulers and across the city. So it's hard to compare rates, honestly. I've been looking at averages, but again, it's very hard to say, okay, the average of a 32-gallon trash container is this, and the average of a 96-gallon trash container is this. Because I also have to say this 96-gallon trash container with hauler A and this 96-gallon trash container with hauler A are paying vastly different rates. So it's very hard to compare across the city. I will be putting, as I continue that analysis, putting more information up there on the website. I think currently the average recycling and trash monthly rate for residents in Richfield, that from the bills that I have, this doesn't take into account like weighted garbage size or anything like that, because it is hard to distinguish. Like I said, some people with a 64-gallon cart are paying less than people with a 96-gallon cart. Some of this does not make sense, but I think the average monthly cost is a little over $33 for recycling and trash. This does not include yard waste, and also the extra fees is. Yeah, so it's hard to compare. I do work with people if they are curious about understanding their bills currently. I'm more than happy to take a look and kind of tell them, how that might compare overall. Richfield rates comparing to other nearby cities. Bloomington, before they organized, their average trash and recycling rate was a little over $26 a month. So, and that was calculated from their invoice survey that they did. So not the entire city. Obviously, it just depends on who sends in invoices. But that's the average that they had in 2015. So
thank you very much for your response. This is Clayton. Your response, I'll speak for myself, concerned about cost and concerned about how having government regulate or manage those contracts, historically, that's never been a very successful program. But what you just told me was you don't know what the costs are. So how are you going to measure fiscal sense and equity if you don't even know what your starting costs are?
Well, I have the rates from invoices that residents have sent in. I'm just saying I don't have the invoices from every resident in the city.
Okay, so you have a small segment. I'm making up that word. Correct. Small. I don't know what percentage of respondents you have, but if you're going to make this more applicable to the entire city, I would very strongly encourage you to get larger sampling. Otherwise, you're just making things up.
We're attempting to get.
I'm not going to sound. I'm not trying to sound too harsh, but that's really the blunt of it. Thanks.
Yep, thank you. We're attempting to get invoices from all our residents, who are willing to send them in. We're not turning anybody away. There's no hard deadline or anything like that. I'm trying to get as many as possible. which, they're a lot to analyze, but I still want, all residents who are comfortable and willing to send in invoices, which, are not being shared publicly. I am the one who's aggregating them and things like that to send them in to achieve that higher sampling. That's why we did open it up to the entire city. Other cities have only asked, smaller sections of their, city or population, specific groups and whatnot, but we're really trying to make this as inclusive process as we can. So thanks for your feedback.
Have you put out a survey? This is the first I've heard that you collect invoices. So I don't know how you're publicizing that that's an option to collect rates. If you have like a Survey Monkey or something that you're sending out, how are you attempting to collect that information?
No, we don't. There's not a survey. This gets into, it's a little hard to conduct a survey getting all the information that I get off of a specific invoice. So residents have been emailing copies or screenshots of their last itemized invoice. And it's a little, we haven't talked about the idea of creating a survey to get this data from residents. That would have to be something that we would bring back to other city staff to see if that's a possibility. But residents have just been emailing their bills in, and so far, and we've gotten, I don't know, probably over 100. I'd have to double check that number.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share that email again?
My email address? Sure, I will put it in the chat. It is rlindholm@richfieldmn.gov. So it's my first initial and last name. It is on the organized collection webpage, as well as most of the Facebook posts that we've been putting out about organized collection. So it's also now in the chat. Amy, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yes, if you have an invoice, please feel free to share it with Rachel. We can add it to the survey she's doing and collecting that information. The next person is Kirk Spencer. He has a comment that just notes the Facebook page has a lot of concern around service guarantees or the city to moderate, echoing the current caller's concern. I'd also like to echo the request of weekly recycling. The Darko notes accountability is key. We experienced the poor service too. There was fees on top of fees. Lisa Tesh asks, will the collection company use a different truck for every type of pickup, such as recycling, trash, and yard waste? That would be 3 different trucks to come to the house.
Yep, that's how it works in an open system too. You don't collect the same waste with the same trucks. It goes to separate places. It's processed differently. You don't want contamination, things like that. So that continues in organized systems as well.
Teresa Reddington had a question we already answered, but some people might have missed it, and wants to know about the billing, and it would still come from the hauler, not from the city.
And that ties into Kirk's comment below too, seeing costs related being covered by fees. So the city is not looking to hire additional staff to help with this, and that's in part to not increase the cost of any system, and really using resources strategically. That's where I come in as a sustainability specialist. That's where we look at things like haulers who have the billing infrastructure to continue using that, so that we are keeping costs as low as possible, or not adding new ones.
Patty has a comment question. In an open system, one can change companies if service is poor. Where do you go if the government is running the whole system?
Right. So I think we've talked about this a little bit already, and the goal and how an organized contract helps protect against poor service. With having things like liquidated damages, financial penalties, and bringing that service quality up, having more, requirements for, like one requirement is in Bloomington's contract is that they all have local points of customer service, contact for customer service, which, with some haulers, they have more nationwide based call centers. So really making sure that, the cities are receiving that high quality of service. And then if the service is poor, there are other things included in a contract. I've never seen a city, permanently disband a system in the middle of the contract due to service. Usually, individual haulers address the problems as needed, and the city steps in to make sure that those financial charges are being assessed and things like that.
Okay, the next question is from KTA. In Minneapolis, we were able to put out large items every pickup, every week, etc. Is this being considered?
Yep. So I think, we talked about bulky item before, figuring out a collection system for Richfield that makes sense. Putting out large items every week. Minneapolis is a little bit of a different situation because the city themselves hauls a fair amount of the city. So their system is a little more flexible. They have the city staff that are hauling. It's a system unlike any other city. In Minnesota, at least. So it won't follow, we won't be able to do Minneapolis's system, but we are going to help create a Richfield bulky item collection system for residents.
All right, the next one is a comment from Kirk Spencer. He'd like to see the city protected from fuel surcharge fees. Frequently, gas prices go up, so there is an added surcharge, but the fees never go down when the price of fuel goes down.
This is a good observation. The fuel surcharge fees, they're a very interesting thing to try and understand, and that's something I've noticed in the bills I've received. Some residents don't get fuel surcharge fees, and I don't really understand, how that happens. It's not just that one hauler doesn't charge them. It's just that discrepancy in haulers. Some residents, customers of one hauler will get it, and some of the same hauler won't. That can add up. I've seen fuel surcharge fees of $150 on a single invoice. So it's hefty. And that's where the transparency of rates in an organized system, having a rate for recycling and the costs are included in that rate, and it doesn't have an extra, fuel surcharge fee or another, escalator or anything like that, to have those extra costs in the contract.
Great. The next question is one I can see it kind of in a few questions that are out in front of us, and we have about 7 minutes left. So hopefully the answer to this one will help with a few others. Verderko asks, knowing there are fees to cancel with current providers, and another question is, I just started with a new hauler. How would this be resolved? Like that
Right.
switch and to cancel?
Yep. So there would if organized collection goes through, there would be no fee for residents who might have to cancel service if their hauler is changed. You would not be charged for that. In the question that talks about signing with a new hauler, so if you have like an annual contract that you have already signed or will be going to sign, and there is the potential that organized collection could start during that annual contract, you would be reimbursed those charges by your hauler. And that would be, language that's included in the contract. I know some residents are, a little apprehensive that they would get their money back from the hauler, but it would be included in the contracts that your hauler would reimburse you for services not yet received. So the rest of your contract term, whether it's the rest of the year or 2 years or, a few months or whatever. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay. The next one's a comment from Clayton Vasquez again. Experience shows that government-run systems do not provide the best pricing. Madurko is still confused on how this differs from monopoly, but we still have a choice of hauler that is licensed in Richfield.
Organized collection works. So the state statute process that Richfield is, or any city is required to follow in organizing collection, initially requires all haulers that are licensed residentially to be involved in the system unless they choose not to participate. So all haulers can stay. They don't lose any of their existing market share base percentage. They're not being, they can only, like I said, if they choose not to participate, that's their decision. If they choose to sell, that's their decision. A lot of people have been commenting on that, thinking that means that, a lot of haulers would just sell out based on what's happened in other cities. And a few things I'd like to bring up are that we have, first of all, a lot fewer haulers than other cities have. So they each have more of a market share than, a city that has 7, 10, 15 haulers. And the size of the haulers in Richfield, all the haulers in Richfield, is substantial. And the market share is that is such that, the likelihood of haulers selling out in Richfield doesn't seem to be very high. So I know people are sometimes worried that this might push a hauler out of the city, but if anything, it actually creates more of that job stability for haulers, since they do know what their market share is. So there is no choice of hauler necessarily. You will have the hauler that your area of the city is assigned. That might be your current hauler, and that might be a different hauler. But each hauler still operates in Richfield.
Okay. We just have a few minutes left, so I'm going to jump to a few people we haven't heard from yet. The next one is from Jenna Hansen. She has a question about speed. If the trucks are stopping at each house, they are essentially forced to drive slowly, or more of a comment, which is true.
Right.
There is a question from Paul, and I don't think we've heard from Paul yet. You said there are people putting their garbage in park bins, which we have seen quite a bit of, and I've seen that happen. Are you going to enforce a rule that everybody has to have garbage service to minimize that from happening?
So yeah, currently city code does require all residents to have garbage service, or I think the language is an environmentally sound alternative. And the city will be looking at, what does that mean? If there is an option for residents to opt out of, parts of a system, whether it's specific services that, might, be, mandatory, like if we have organics collection for the entire city, if there's an opt-out system for that, or if there is, an opt-out system for people who leave Richfield for a certain amount of time, every winter or whatever the season may be. But we haven't figured out the details for how enforcement would happen. We do have code enforcement, and they do their best to enforce the variety of ordinances in the city. However, that staff is fairly small. So figuring out how everyone can have service, and making sure that that's standardized throughout the city. Currently, we do have things like garbage sharing in an organized system that's not as feasible to have. So providing options like every other week trash collection for those who don't produce as much waste, but ensuring that people do still have garbage service for the waste that they do produce is also an option. But yeah, we'll have to circle back about the specifics of enforcement.
Okay, it's just about 3 o'clock, so I have one last question we haven't really had yet that I think I'll give you, Rachel. And then again, if there's questions and comments we haven't been able to discuss and read, Please feel free to contact Rachel or myself via email or give us a call. We'd be more than happy to chat with you about your concerns and questions. The last one's from Marsha, and she said, I read that Bloomington's program split the city into quadrants and separate contracts were awarded to different carriers in each quadrant. Is this true? And is this what is being proposed for Richfield or awarding to one carrier?
So I think I understand what Marcia's asking. First of all, we're not looking at a single hauler system. We are following the state statute, which requires the city, and this is what Bloomington did as well, requires the city to talk, to negotiate, whatever the language you want to use is, to all licensed haulers, all residentially licensed haulers. So yes, Bloomington did split the city into, I don't know if it was necessarily quadrants, but sections. But all the haulers work off of the same contract. They're charging the same rates. They're held to the same standards. And actually in Bloomington, they didn't sign a separate contract. They work as a group, so they signed one contract. But yes, each hauler serves a different section. So in that sense, it is similar to what Richfield is looking at. And like I said, that is because that's what's required by the state statute when a city initially looks at organizing collection. After initial period, the city has more leeway to do, to pursue further options. But for this initial period, that is what we are looking at.
Okay, so again, I still see there are comments and questions. And Rachel put her email address there. I will put mine as well, so feel free to reach out to either of us. I'll put my phone number, so feel free to call or email, and we'll be happy to listen and to your questions and concerns. And again, we're at a stage in the process where we've been charged from council to just gather information from the community, gather the information through negotiations, and bring it to the council so they can make the best decision for our community for this process moving forward.
Yep, and just to clarify, we do have a frequently asked questions document. I will be adding several of these questions to it, and several of these that were asked are already in it. I highly encourage you all to go check that out on the city's website, and my information is on that specific document as well. So if you do still have follow-up questions, I'll be getting to the comments as much as I can. But I highly encourage you all to reach out to me and or Amy and send me your invoices as well if that's something that you're comfortable with. So thank you all.